one of the mistakes I think that we make a lot as parents and as educators is to hold kids accountable to the end goal, to the outcome, instead of really working with them on the process of learning how to manage this executive function.
You're listening to Parenting with Impact, the podcast for parents like you, raising complex kids to become capable, independent adults, even in this complicated world. Each episode brings expert insights and real-life strategies to help you parent with confidence, calm, and clarity. Here are your hosts, Elaine and Diane.
Welcome back, everybody, to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. Diane and I here today to riff on issues of import to our community. So, Diane, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the intersection. This is Diane being formal here for a second. We're talking about the intersection between executive function and education, between school and executive function. And I think part of where this came from is it's a common issue, number one, for our community. And we hear it all the time. It's like, my kid's so smart, but they're having a hard time in school. Or I don't know how to help my kid with their schoolwork. And I know that they've got executive function challenges and I'm not kind of sure with this. And I was on the phone this morning with a mom of a 14-year-old. And I don't know, Lane, if you hear this all the time, but at some point in the school environment, these super smart kids hit a wall, right? And this super smart kid, probably gifted, hit the wall in ninth grade, right? Things that up until ninth grade, their smarts compensated for their executive function challenges. And the example that this mom gave was like the kid could spend 15 minutes studying before an exam and just pick it up and do great on an exam.
Right.
And now that there's some executive function challenges behind she called it time blindness was the example that she gave. So this kid has time blindness. And so his ability to plan ahead and figure out how much time is he going to need and what is he, like organizing and scheduling the studying and stuff is completely different because the work is more complicated. And so that's just one example of this is a super smart kid who is suddenly hitting the wall because his executive function challenges have gotten in the way, I guess is the way I would say it. It's a sort of the balance between their executive functions and their intellect has gotten big enough that it's caught up with them, and the gap has caught up with them, and they're starting to struggle. Is there a different way that you introduce this challenge?
Yeah, so I'm listening to you, and it's like a lot of things are coming up, right? So first of all, I want to address this notion that this is the thing about complex kids is that all of them are typically doing fine until they hit a wall. And they may hit a wall at 6 or 10 or 14 or 18 or 22.
28.
Right? Like they all are doing fine until what you're describing, there's this gap that widens enough where they can no longer compensate for what's expected of them just by being smart and just by powering through. So that's one thing that comes up. So that notion of when do they hit a wall, that's why we see kids getting diagnosed in late high school or college or beyond because they've been able to navigate it. The other thing that really comes up as I'm hearing that is that a lot of our kids, because they're so smart and things come to them so easily, they don't develop frustration tolerance. Mm-hmm. Right? So they once they do hit the wall feels even bigger, harder, firmer, whatever, because they haven't learned how to struggle, right? And that's part of learning. And if your kid's really smart and they kind of work around things and they get around it, they don't learn to be okay with making mistakes. They don't learn to learn by failure. And so that frustration tolerance or intolerance becomes kind of this exacerbating because that's an emotional regulation issue. Right?
Well, and I just it's so funny because you said that, and I'm like, I immediately have a story from Diane Land that you may have never even heard this.
Ooh,
but,
fun.
I was one of those, everybody knows I was a high performer, but I was a straight A student in high school, and I got to pre-calculus, and I struggled because pre-calculus works completely differently than my brain does, and I figured that out later, but I didn't know that when I was taking pre-calculus, and the teacher was going to give me a B+. And I was like, it was like the worst thing in the world that could have happened, right? It's just sort of, how dare you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like to this day, I hate, like I have this like math phobia-ish kind of thing because of that experience. And it's exactly what you're describing. I didn't develop frustration tolerance because it came so easy to me. And then here's this thing that's hard. And I had never had an opportunity to try things that were hard for me up until then. And so yes, it's from Diane Land, but our kids struggle with this all the time.
Well, and school is a generalist's experience, and our kids tend to be specialists. And when we expect them to be great or equally good at everything, and they've got kind of a specialist brain, your experience was in math, mine was in science, right? Similar but different. And because I was a smart kid, they expected that I should be able to do equally well in all the different categories.
Well, I think the other parallel thing to this, because not all of you who are listening have kids that you would label as gifted. We happen to have 2E kids in both of our families. And and Elaine, I think you identify as 2E as well as an adult. Yeah. And the other flavor of this is kids who mask really well. I think I find this particularly in girls. And I was talking to another mom the other day and who did really, really well in school, but she did it because her motivation was she wanted the teachers to be proud of her. She wanted she wanted her friends to like her. She wanted to be one of the cool kids, right? It's so there was an enormous amount of motivation to perform well. And we know that if a kid has ADHD or executive function challenges, if it's something they're really motivated and interested in doing, it's an entirely different world. And so this particular student ended up with a teacher who they just didn't like at all. And all of a sudden their grades tanked in that one class. And the parents were like, whoa, wait, what's going on? And again, it's a different kind of wall, but it's a wall because this child was able to perform in a different way because they were really motivated to do well in school is, I guess, the way I would describe it.
Yeah. Well, and the flip side to that is what's the cost of that intense motivation. So that what you described was me in a lot of ways. And the anxiety propelled me to be really successful in school. But the result was that I got sick and that I had a lot of anorexic tendencies. And like I ended up with all kinds of illness related stuff from the stress that in those days, nobody put the two together, right? To figure out what was really happening to me was that I was actually making myself sick because the need to perform was so strong and so driven, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that that's the piece of it is that because you didn't understand until much later that what was really going on was that you had learning differences.
Right, exactly, and attention differences, and I didn't know. And so it's interesting because we started up talking about kind of the relationship between school and school success and executive function. And up until now, kind of what we're talking about is the emotional regulation of executive function. And that's just one of many aspects of 6 aspects of executive function that really shows up for these kids. But that emotional management piece is so key to being able to be present to what's expected of us at school.
Well, and so I think that the bottom line, and then we can take a break, is like there are all kinds of executive function challenges that tie into, and let's riff on this for a minute, because if you think about all the struggles that your kid has with regard to school, and school's a big giant bucket, but whether it's just, completing work or staying focused in class or being able to keep up with the lecture and take notes, or whether it's writing essays, or, there's all these different challenges. And this is one of the things that I think we talk about with parents a lot. It's like this, you got to figure out what's really going on underneath it and not just start with my kid's struggling with school. Is like to get really clear. This mom this morning, as she and I were poking into it, he was doing fine. I said, well, what about homework? She goes, no. He's doing fine on his homework. He's able to do that. It's really test preparation.
Oh, that was me. Yeah.
So, and then it was like, okay, so is it test preparation? Is it test preparation for all classes or just classes that are less favored classes, right? It's just sort of, so you're really kind of looking in and going, what's really the struggle? And then you go, okay, so what is the executive function that ties in here to this struggle? So as an example, and then we can again go on break, but an example would be homework, right? It's just sort of my kid is having a hard time doing their homework. Well, is it about avoiding distractions? Is it about getting started? Is it about knowing what their homework is? Those are 3 different executive functions that all
You're gonna
tie into homework, but you've got to be really clear.
you're gonna problem solve differently depending on what's causing the
Right. So
problem.
you got to know what the struggle is really. And then you've got to figure out what the executive function challenge is underneath it. Is anything you
So,
want to
so
say?
yeah, what I want to do is just kind of explain that, and we'll direct you to another podcast on it. But in our world, we use the work of Dr. Tom Brown, and there's 6 key areas of executive function that that our kids tend to struggle with. Some areas of them, maybe not all. And so emotional regulation is one of them that we were talking about earlier. And then sort of task management is one that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Then there's effort, which is kind of the energy that it takes to get going on something or to stick with something, is another. Memory is another. Working memory, using memory, holding memory, remembering to or what not to do, that kind of thing. What am I missing?
Energy.
I think I did energy and effort.
Oh, energy and effort are the same one.
Right.
I can't do it without the chart in front of me. We got to put the chart in the notes.
We'll put the chart in the notes. So there's the kind of physical hyperactivity, regulating your impulsivity or your active body, and then there's attention, right? Good old fashioned. You have your chart, but we just hit all 6 of them. So then there's good old fashioned attention, and there are a million aspects to attention. It's not just do you pay attention or not. It's knowing what to pay attention to, when to pay attention, what's important about what you're paying attention to, avoiding the distraction and staying attentive to it. Like there are a lot of pieces that are involved with that one area. Go ahead.
So here, I pulled out my Sanity School workbook.
Okay.
Motivation, action, memory, focus, emotion, and energy are the 6.
Excellent. And I just want the record to reflect that my
got them.
working memory got them all.
Oh, Lane.
Did this work a while? It's finally stuck in. You guys, our own model, I used to keep it up on the wall of my office because I couldn't remember our own model for like 5 years. So,
Well, and my brain's 62 years old. And so like things just keep falling out the back end every day.
all right, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and figure out what to do about all this.
Do you recognize current ADHD interventions fall short? At Dig Coaching, we have developed a new field of engineering and a new ADHD intervention called Cognitive Ergonomics from the Inside Out. To learn more, visit cognitive-ergonomics.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're having a really cool conversation about school success and executive function. And we've talked about the emotional piece of executive function and kind of the organizational piece and introduced all the different areas of executive function and all the ways that the challenges can come about. Where do you want to go from here, Di?
Well, I think the thing I want to introduce is kind of how to figure this out, because we were talking before the break about kind of understanding, getting really clear about what is the struggle, and then getting really clear about what the executive function challenge is that might be related. It's executive function challenges, parentheses, maybe more than one, that go along with the struggle, right? So there's those 2 sort of inquiries. And what I want to talk about is like how to do that and how to involve your kid in that, because when your kids are younger, you might be able to kind of watch and observe and infer. But one of the most beautiful parts of this process is if you can work with your kid to go, here's what you're really good at. Here's what your strengths are. What are some of your challenges? How does it tie in? Where are the places that you don't have any problem at all? Where are the places that you're really struggling, right? So you're dialoguing with your kid, not in a like, oh my gosh, we got to fix all the stuff that's broken, but everybody has challenges and everybody has strengths. And the more we unearth those, the easier is it for us to lean into those. And I'm thinking about what you were saying about our kids being specialists in a generalist world. One of the great pieces of medicine for that is helping your kids know what they're great at and then helping them understand, okay, I'm not great at basketball and I'm good at this and I'm not bad at that and that sort of thing. You look like you want to add something.
Well, I think what's coming to me is like, I'm with you on this strength-based approach. It's so important. And I want to go back to what you said a minute ago, which is we as parents have to be careful not to pathologize the gaps, right? These kids struggle with executive function challenges. That's just the nature of it. All kids struggle with some area of executive function challenges because The executive function is not kind of fully formed and cooked until their mid-20s. When we label it as such, our kids can resist because we're trying to tell them what's wrong with them, or they feel that we're telling them what's wrong with them. So we really want to be careful not to make it be we have to fix this problem you have. But to what you're saying is like, let's focus on where your gifts are, where your strengths are, what's frustrating for you, where are you struggling? Would you like some help working with that?
And I think it's an important clarification because a lot of times parents will say, well, my kid has delays in executive function. I've got to catch them up by Job. And I just say that on our podcast. It's pretty funny. But I've got to catch them up. And the reality is if you have a child who's delayed in executive function, they may be ready to learn the skills associated with that executive function, or they may not yet be ready to learn those skills. And we need to accommodate those executive functions. I mean, kids in public schools in the US, at least, often will have 504 plans or IEP plans that are designed to accommodate those challenges and those delays in executive function. And we talk all the time with parents about how do you create accommodations at home with homework, with chores, with helping around the house, whatever it is.
Getting along with siblings, whatever it is.
Yeah. What are the accommodations we need at home? And so again, the bottom line is that it's not about fixing a broken executive function. And the reminder, like here's the commercial, ADHD meds, if you've got a kid with ADHD and executive function challenges, ADHD meds are not designed to fix executive function challenges. That's not what they do. So
that was one of the biggest awarenesses. When we figured that out and learned that, we were both like, wait, what? We'd been doing this for years before we understood that.
Oh, and how many parents do I talk to? And it's like this sort of, well, my kid's struggling in school and they're on ADHD meds. Shouldn't they be fine? And it's like, so work that way.
So can I say what you just said again and say it a little more directly, right? The purpose of medication for ADHD is to reduce some of the symptoms, to maybe enhance the ability to focus, maybe reduce emotionality, maybe if there are other meds, maybe even to improve mood. Okay. None of those things are going to teach a kid to organize backpack. They make the kid more receptive to learning to organize their backpack, or maybe less frustrated with being expected to organize the backpack and being helped to learn how. But it's not going to actually get them to organize the backpack.
Well, and I'm going to tweak the language you said is because you said they might make them more receptive. And so it's not that
allow them to be more receptive.
Yeah, it's a sort of it's creating an environment where they might be more receptive because they're going to be a little bit more job regulated or maybe able to focus more. I mean, those two pieces that you were talking about with the emotional regulation and the focus will sometimes create an environment where the kids are like, oh, wait, I'm calm enough. I'm avoiding distractions enough that I can focus with you on learning this skill in a different way than I could if I've got the message.
A million things going on. Yeah. No, huge, huge, huge. So executive function is going to be a challenge that needs to be managed no matter what for all of our kids. Understanding and adults, but especially kids. Especially when it comes, we're talking about school success, right?
Yeah.
And understanding where the challenge is showing up. So I've got like one kid who actually can organize herself, but getting activated, getting started required a lot of help. Another kid was willing to sit down and do the homework, but it would take 2 hours because they couldn't organize themselves around how to get it done.
Again, another thing because we talk about this so much and I always forget to remember to bring in some of the pieces, but Elaine, I'm remembering that workshop that we did in London 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh, longer.
And it was like one of the first times we were in front of a group of educators and we said to them, okay, if you think about school success and what percentage of it is intellect and what percentage of it is executive function? And they all said...
We asked them to show of hands, right? What percentage of school success do you think is an executive function?
And the answer was like 75% of school success is about executive function. So going back to at the beginning, even a really smart kid, if they're delayed in executive function, their ability to be successful in school is going to be completely different because they're already starting with a delay.
Right.
And I'm not using the word delay, not deficit, but technically a delay becomes a deficit in many ways.
Yeah, it can. And what they don't want to hear from you is because you have this deficit, therefore you have to, right? So we as the adults in their lives have to kind of know this is there and figure out how to accommodate, support, and enroll them in catching them up without making them feel like they're broken or something's wrong. It's a very delicate dance when you think about it that way.
Well,
right?
and I think it's important, as you were saying, that without them feeling like something's broken or wrong. I was talking to another family this morning, and they were talking about whether or not to share their child's diagnosis, and they really didn't want the child to feel labeled and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I think that the reality is that these kids are struggling. And we always say that if we don't help them understand what's going on underneath the struggles, they're going to create a story. And the story they're going to create is often going to be much worse than, oh, your brain's wired differently. Oh, you have anxiety. Oh, you have ADHD. You have whatever it happens to.
Right. Because that's an explanation. And without the explanation, what they make up is that they're lazy, crazy, or stupid.
Well, and again, you said it's an explanation. And that's what's important about that for me is that we're not talking about an excuse, right? We're talking about the tool that an explanation gives you is you get to meet your kid where they're at.
Really at. Yes.
Really at, and then challenge them from there in incremental steps, which is what we all want to do. We want to help our kids to become more advanced, more independent, more whatever. We want them to grow and change and expand, but we're doing it from where they are instead of, oh, you're in 9th grade, you're supposed to be here, which is exhausting for them. And frankly, it's going to be exhausting for you as a parent.
Yeah. All right. So what do you feel like we're taking away from this conversation?
I'm feeling like we need to keep talking about this. Maybe we need to do another episode.
Well, so here's what I want to synthesize for this conversation. If we're looking at that relationship between school success and executive function, what we want you to understand is that, first of all, it has nothing to do with how intelligent your kid is at all. Second of all, if you're listening to this, chances are because the kids you care about are struggling with some aspects of executive function, if not all 6, at least a few of those areas. And third, we want you to really understand that the better we can understand where those gaps are for them, where their delay may be or what they're struggling with, the better we can support them. One of the mistakes I think that we make a lot as parents and as educators is to hold kids accountable to the end goal, to the outcome, instead of really working with them on the process of learning how to manage this executive function. So instead of saying, well, you're going to get this reward if you get an A on the test, we really want to be focusing on, we're going to acknowledge or give you whatever reward, if that's your approach, for every time you study 10 minutes prepping for this test. And let's sit down and look at what test prep looks like for you and help you do it in a way that it works for you. So getting really granular in some ways, but in what's in it for the kid, not to achieve the end result, but for them to feel good about being in the process of learning and feeling successful in that learning environment.
Well, and I think the things that I would use to bottom line this are, one, you got to really get clear on what the struggle is. And there's some work to really see what class, what situation, what homework versus testing.
What's working and what's not.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's their struggle specifically? And then what's the executive function challenge that might be underneath it or challenges? And then the third piece is like, how do I partner with my child to work on this together rather than being in that sort of, okay, I gotta fix this for my kid.
Yeah, beautiful. And I guess here's the other thing I'll offer. Those of you who are listening who are in our programs in Sanity School, in Module 2 of Sanity School, there's a worksheet on executive function that really helps you understand this and helps you go through with your kid and help your kid understand where their strengths are and where their challenges are without kind of pathologizing and making them feel really bad about it. So it's a great worksheet in Module 2 if you've got access to that.
Awesome.
All right, folks. You're amazing. Thanks for tuning in. As always, well, take a minute. What are you taking away from today?
Yeah. Let's reflect. What's your nugget? What's your aha? What's your insight from our conversation around school and executive function?
Yeah. Next up on the podcast is going to be Hillary Gillio talking from Restful Beginnings, talking about sleep. Great conversation. And as always, friends, thank you for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids by being here, tuning in, listening, being a conscious parent. You make an amazing difference.
See you next time.
Bye, y'all.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.